Hey guys, here's a quick lesson on developing alternate picking speed and stamina for speed picking in metal and rock. So I did a little bit there using a kind of popular Paul Gilbert pattern. We'll get to that and we'll use that pattern mainly just to start with. But there are 3 or 4 things that I mainly have focused on to develop my alternate picking. It's not something that came natural, so it took quite a bit of work, and it took different resources and trying different things. So the 3 main things would be the size of the pick stroke. That's really important to lessen that. That was my big problem, is that I had too large of a pick stroke. The mechanisms and muscles which you're using in your right arm are pretty important, and being able to control them and relax them. And then the third one that really helped me was what I call alternate picking spurts. So, taking a lick or an idea that can be alternate picked continuously, but doing a little bit of legato in there, kind of like Ingve style, to lessen that tension for just a second, and then developing that up and until you aren't doing any of the legato. Besides that kind of fourth thing I mentioned was obviously the pick angle. So having that pick at a 45-degree angle is very important, and not using too much of the pick tip. That's also really important. So with those 2 things in mind, we can talk about the very first thing, which is lessening that pick stroke. Okay, so that pick stroke, the way to do that is, let's take that simple idea, and we're using like an E blues. I'm a half step down, so for you guys it'd be an E flat blues scale. So this thing. Right, you can start from the highest note or the lowest note. If you start from the lowest note, then you'll start with a downstroke. If you start from the highest note, you'll start with an upstroke. So down. Right, so either way I think is fine. I like to start with the upstroke sometimes. I like to start with the downstroke sometimes. It just depends on what note I want to be accented. Accenting is also a big part of this step. So we'll take that idea. We can just start with, let's do the upstroke thing since I like that. So the way to do this is to, when you're playing that lick, you're going to plant your pick. You're going to go really slow, and you're going to plant your pick on the spot that it needs to play next. So you'd get this type of sound. Screw that up. So as quickly as possible, I am planting my pick on the next spot that it needs to pick. So as soon as I play that first note, it's landing on the top side of that G string. I don't know if you can see that either, but every time I continue at that, so if I'm on the same string for those last 3 notes, I am literally picking that note and then immediately trying to land on the other side as fast as I can. You have to start this slow, because what it does is it trains, what it did for me is it trains your hand to just lessen that stroke and get used to jumping there. So as you speed that up, it'll start to shrink that pick stroke, right? So right, the other thing that's important in there is accenting. Whether it's that highest note or that lowest note, it's important to accent, because when you accent, you lessen the need for power in those other 3 notes. So 1 E and one. I guess it's 4, 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So accenting that first note, those other 5 notes, they don't. I'm not relying on as much power in those, because I'm really focusing on that one accent. So I'm really getting that accent, which then lessens the tension or the, power I'm going to need for those other 5 notes. So accenting is extremely important. Okay, we're going to skip a step. We're going to skip the arm thing. We're going to jump to the spurts of notes that are important, that helped me. So for those spurts, it'd be this. It'd basically be taking the same idea and not alternate picking the whole thing, but rather you're going to do a little bit of legato with that. So you might do it in any way you want, but the accented note will stay picked. So maybe I'll just start with just picking that accented note, and then maybe the switch to the next string. So maybe something like this. So essentially developing your legato, right, in that lick. And then as you get further and further, you add more picks. So maybe I'll do 3 picks. Or I'll do 4, actually. So essentially, I'm just legatoing the ascension, and I'm picking the descent, right? And then work that up to speed, right? And then from there, you can, I don't know if there's another step to add more after that. I guess I could pick, I guess I was already picking that. Yeah, so I'm only excluding 2 notes now. I'm only doing legato for 2 notes. Those 2. So now I try to add those in, right? Right? And then I'm using that accenting. I'm using that smaller pick stroke. I'm using that 45-degree angle, and I'm using less of the tip of my pick. I'm not using a big chunk of my pick. I want to use the tip, but I still want to maintain that power. So that's why we practice that slow lessening our pick stroke exercise that we did earlier. That's really important. So a lot of things going in here. If you're going on here, if you don't have this naturally, a lot of things to think about. And like I said, these are just the things that I thought about and I did that helped me. The last thing that I think helped all these little things was thinking about what I'm doing with my right hand as far as the muscle groupings. I naturally tense my arm and use my forearm and kind of do that I guess, jitter. I don't even know what to call that. Like it's like a tense shake there. And that's what I used to do when I played in metal bands growing up. I wanted to do some sort of, tremolo picking. I do stuff like that. And so that kind of was just naturally ingrained and is a bad habit that I started when I wanted to play those trem picking parts in metal bands growing up. So I just kind of stayed. But, there are 3 things going on here. I could use that jitter thing, or maybe I could use that to my advantage. There's the Ingve thing, and a lot of people use this, and I only call it Ingve thing because that's the first time I noticed someone using it. And that is holding your pick in what would be called the correct positioning. So your thumb on top of the flat part of the pick, and then that pick on top of this joint of your index finger pointing out. So basically this type of thing. Basically just allowing you to do this motion with your thumb and your first finger there, or your pointer finger. So if you're able to do that, you can kind of get that Ingve motion, which is literally just utilizing those muscles to get to alternate picking. So basically pulling that in, pushing it out, pulling it in, pushing it out. So you'd have something like this. And I'm not too good at that, but developing that can help with accenting because you can use that pull to really accent those higher notes. Right? So those accented notes there are from that pull there. So I'm developing that speed a little bit to try to get that up to a certain level, and then I can just use it a little bit if I need to. The other thing is the wrist. This is the confusing part because a lot of people think the wrist action is this back and forth, like almost like this thing, and it's not. It's a twist in the wrist. It's more natural for us, right? We will more naturally twist things, like twisting a doorknob, or that our hand moves easier that way than to go like this. So like this doesn't make sense to me. So it's a twist, which we don't really notice, but when you really focus in on it and really think of how that feels, that wrist movement is a twist. It's back and forth, but nevertheless, it's about utilizing the wrist in general and getting used to that. So now we take that wrist movement, which is more of a twist than we think. this type of thing, and I'm gonna now just focus on using my wrist. Right? And I can only get that up to a certain speed as well. So I'm not really going to focus on my forearm because that for me is natural. So I'm going to include that in with these other things to get that speed I need. So this for the speed, and then the other parts for the dexterity, the accuracy, for the little accents. So now when I alternate pick, for me it feels like I'm using all those things, which might sound ridiculous, but it's a little bit of each. And I'm able to get, you know, what I'm looking for. Right, that type of thing. Okay, yeah, so those are really the main things that I focus on. So to recap, to start with, we're using a 45-degree angle with our pick. We're using less of the pick. If you can get a jazz 3, those helped me. Don't need to have a jazz 3, but they help me. You're going to want to lessen that pick stroke with that exercise. And that exercise can only be done slow. So that will be the way to go about that. And then using those little spurts, those little spurt exercises just to get the legato and to give a little bit less strain here and kind of working it up until you have fully alternate picked. Okay? And this really works with any alternate picking pattern. This is just the one I chose because this is the one that really helped me. And then the last thing is really honing in on those 3 kind of muscle groups. And I don't know what those muscle groups are. I just know that it's my forearm, it's my wrist, and it's my first finger and my thumb doing that movement. So I practice all of those, or at least the ones I'm not doing naturally. So my thumb and finger and my wrist action, getting those to a comfortable speed or to a point where they're comfortable to use those, and then I can utilize those to my advantage. And then the last thing I forgot that's really important that we don't want to forget are the accents. So no matter what you're doing, if it's 16th notes or if it's triplets, you want to accent. So if it's 16th note triplets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If it's just 16 notes, then 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. So that's extremely important because again, it kind of goes back into that little spurt thing that I did. It lessens the amount of I guess strain on our arm because we are focusing on that one accented note and then letting those other ones kind of relax a little bit and then hitting that accent note. And I know that sounds like a lot, but I think this should help people who really have had trouble developing their alternate picking. The last thing I'll leave you with is this is not something that you can practice lightly and it'll just come. You have to really give it some time and really practice it a lot. It's definitely one of those things you can just do in front of a TV or whatever, and you can just kind of play one pattern over and over again because it's a technique. So you can do that with different patterns. One more pattern I'll give you is this one that you might be familiar with. And you should know how to develop those or find those with your ear. I'm not going to do tabs for this, unfortunately, but hopefully you can pick those up and use those to your advantage, and hopefully this helps you practice and develop that alternate picking speed, because I know these things helped me.